Good afternoon and welcome everyone. And good afternoon and welcome Juliana. Thanks for joining to chat with us about your amazing book. Before we start, let me introduce Juliana Weinberg and her book. Juliana is German and lives in Germany. That's why the interview will be held in English, and we have the pleasure to interview her from Germany. So Juliana, she has written several books, and we have the pleasure to have Audrey Hepburn, Entre, Diamantes, translated into Spanish. Audrey Hepburn was one of the biggest stars on the Hollywood horizon and has been an inspiring muse, and still is, for millions of women around the globe. In this book, Juliana narrates us the life story of this diamond. 63 years of shine in so many ways. But I don't want to move on to the book yet. I would like first to share with our friends all about you, about your writing process, and then to get ourselves into the story. Please allow me to ask you, when did it come to you, the idea of writing about a muse like Audrey Hepburn, and were you already a fan of hers?
Well, first I'd like to thank you for interviewing me. It's a great pleasure for me. I'm very pleased to talk about my book, because it's also one of my favorite books. Okay, the first question. I've always been a fan of strong women like Audrey Hepburn, and I always thought she was a role model for girls, for women, because she was very elegant, stylish, down to earth, beautiful. She was so talented in her movies, and in her later years, she worked for UNICEF. She worked for poor children all over the world, for children in need, and I admire that. She didn't only think of herself; she thought of others and gave everything to improve the life of poor children, of children in need. So I think she's a very admirable person. And I love to write that book about her.
Lovely. Yeah, she's like a role model in many ways, professionally and as a person. No? How was the writing process in this case for you, and how long did it take you?
Well, it took me about a year to write the book, but first it was a lot of research. I couldn't start writing like that. I had to learn everything about Audrey there was. So I read many biographies, I watched documentaries, I listened to interviews, and I watched all her movies. So there were many evenings when my family and me, we sat together in front of the TV and we watched all the movies together, and that was quite nice also for my children. They got to love Audrey as well, so it was quite an interesting and nice time.
Nice. Okay, I was going to ask about it. How was it for your family and friends during this writing process?
Well, of course, they participated in some way, because I talked about Audrey very much and talked about her every day, and I told my family some anecdotes I read about Audrey, and so they were quite interested. And sometimes I read some passages to my husband to ask him, what does it sound like? Is it okay? Or could I change something, improve some scenes? And so he was very much in it too. And well, as I said, my children loved the movies, and especially my youngest daughter got to admire Audrey very much. She was 10 at that time, and she always asked, can we watch a movie tonight? And when we said, yes, okay, let's watch a movie with Audrey Hepburn, she always said, oh, and in that movie, does Audrey fell in love? fall in love, and it was always her special thing. She wanted Audrey to fall in love with somebody. So that was quite emotional and quite nice. It was a very beautiful time for all of the family, I think.
Nice. I think that you share. It's just not only work, but also what's in the life of Audrey.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Beautiful. What was your writing process with other books? What I mean is, was there any difference with this book and other ones that you have written?
Yes, in one thing, because it was about such a famous person. And as I said before I started writing the book, I had to do a lot of research, read a lot, and with other books I just plotted the story in my mind and made very many notes and developed the plot. And then I started writing, but everything developed in my head. And with Audrey, it was totally different, because she was a real person who lived and who did incredible things. So the challenge was to capture her personality, which was real, and to get to know her as well as I could. That was very challenging, because with other people in books, I just invent them in my mind, and so it was totally different.
Nice. Okay, now going to our beloved book. I must be honest, as when I read it, of course, because I have to work, I struggle having to let it go. And in the evening, I just rushed to it again. It was, after having finished it, I felt like, the emptiness, as if I had lost Audrey in some way. She's just poor shine to me. And I think I am one of those million women inspired because of, like you said, the strength and these facets she had, and like as a mom, as an actress, in her career, she never stopped, and then helping others. It was just, like a very beautiful person. And and I felt I had this feeling of feeling the story and it being so lively. So I was and my as a reader now, like, I thank you, not for you, for reading her again.
Thank you.
Because I had watched. I knew of Audrey from the beginning, like the early years and the last, because of the UNICEF, but not like this. So that was very, very nice to me. Okay, I'm going to the questions now about the book. Some of us will know more about the life of Audrey Hepburn, some less, but then maybe conclude that she was a privileged child. Was it so?
Yes, in one way she was a very privileged child, because she came out of a wealthy family. Her mother was a baroness, so there was money in the family. And as a child, she could take ballet lessons and do what she liked. So, but on the other side, there were many aspects of her childhood which show she wasn't so privileged after all, because she grew up during World War II, so it was a very dangerous and hard time. And she had to endure hunger, and in the end, she was so weak she couldn't continue dancing ballet for a time. So yes, she was lucky in many ways, but in other ways she wasn't, and she had a hard time, like every child in Europe did in during the World War.
Why did she decide to start ballet, you think? Or you know of?
Okay. Well, she loved to dance and to express herself by dancing, and she always loved that. And she was a gracious person, elegant person, so that suited her, that kind of, well, I call it sport. And as I said before, she came out of a wealthy family, and it just was usual for daughters out of wealthy families to do something like ballet. There were many children her age in that time out of similar families who just did ballet or learn an instrument. And her mother, yes, and her mother encouraged her. She liked her to do ballet. So, well, I think it was just natural for her to do dancing.
How was her relationship with her family? I mean, father, siblings, when she was little?
Well, the relationship to her father was very difficult because he left the family when Audrey was 6. And before, he always behaved in a very cool and distant way. So the relationship wasn't that close to him. And when he left the family when she was 6, it was like a kind of shock for Audrey because everything was different all of a sudden, and she felt empty, and she felt abandoned, and she felt unloved, and especially she couldn't understand why. She couldn't understand why he left her. For a child, it always feels like the father leaves her, not the mother. And she suffered from that for a very long time. Even as an adult, she still suffered from that loss. So when she was an adult and married to Mel Ferrer, her first husband, she suffered from that loss, and so he searched for her father all over the world with the help of the Red Cross. You can read it in the book. And finally he found him in Ireland, and the two of them, Mel and Audrey, went to Ireland to visit her father, but the visit was very brief and disappointing for Audrey because her father hadn't changed his attitude. He still was very cool and distant, and but Audrey understood he just was a cool person, and she couldn't change that. And so it stayed for the rest of her life. They exchanged a few letters, but the relationship didn't grow better after that.
Yeah.
Yes, and you asked.
You mentioned in Spanish, at least, that he was incapable emotionally to give love and to show himself. Yes, he wasn't able to show emotions, and Audrey was a person who longed very much for love and for emotions and comfort and warmth, and so it was very difficult for her. I can imagine. How was the relationship with her mother then, and why was it important to her? Well, the relationship with her mother was very, very close, especially since the father was gone. And her mother, she was called Ella. Her mother was also kind of cool and distant person, but in another way as her father was, because Ella was very loving and caring, and she supported her in every way. She made ballet lessons possible. She encouraged her daughter. She did everything for her, even though Audrey always suspected her to be unloving because of her cool manner, but that wasn't really true as she understood in later years. It was just Ella's attitude, her ways, but she loved her very much, and she was a very important person in her life. And in later years, Ella come to stay with her in Switzerland and was at her side for many years. So that was very important for Audrey. I was going to ask, how would you describe her mom? I think you already answered that. Please tell us a bit of the context, not just the family, but also what was happening in Europe when she was little, once she moves with her grandparents. Where was she and how was it like? I mean, just to put you in context, none of us, we lived the world wars from the other side of the ocean, so it's different for us. Our experience, or our grandparents what tell us was different, I'm sure, what you can tell us. So that's what I would like our readers to understand and know.
Okay, well, Audrey was born in Belgium, and they lived there for several years until the father left the family, and then when World War II began, she moved to the Netherlands with her mother and her brothers because their grandparents, Ella's parents, lived there. And World War II began when she was 6 years old, and it was very, very hard and terrible time because the Netherlands were invaded by German soldiers and occupied until the end of war, and that was very cruel times because the German soldiers watched every step the Dutch people made. There was very little to eat. Especially the winters were very hot, and especially the last winter in war. In Europe it's called a hunger winter because they literally didn't have anything left to eat. So they eat the bulbs of flowers, for example. You can't imagine that nowadays, but it was terrible. And Audrey almost starved herself to death. She was very weak. At the end of the war, she couldn't go to her ballet lessons anymore, what was a nightmare for her. And she also was scared for her brothers because they were older than her. They were adults, and they engaged themselves in the Dutch resistance and took part in attacks during the occupiers, and so in general you can say it was a very dangerous time, very hard time, and that influenced her later life very much.
I can imagine. Would you say, maybe, or how would you say her childhood, what you're describing now, marked her steps in her future?
Well, her childhood influenced her very much because she was so needy during the war. She felt the hunger. She was scared. She felt imprisoned with all the German soldiers around her, so that mocked her. And I think that's why she always stayed a very humble and modest person. And it helped her to become someone who enjoys the little things of life, like a good meal, like nature. She always enjoyed that. Yes, and I think that was because of her childhood. She stayed down to earth, and she didn't become a person who held her nose high in the air. She just was modest and normal, like you can say.
Would you say her early days in ballet marked her as well?
Yes, I think so, because in ballet she learned how to be disciplined, how to obey your teacher, and that's what helped her later in life when she first was at ballet school in London, and then when she made movies, because when you are an actress and make movies, you have to be very disciplined and get up early and listen to the director, and that that she learned early in life when she was at ballet school, I think.
I read in several passages of your book the importance of chocolate in her life. Please explain us why.
Well, as I mentioned before, there was very little to eat during the World War, but then came the day when the war was over and British soldiers came to the town Audrey lived and liberated the town and all the Netherlands. And there is one scene in my book when a British soldier hands over a bar of chocolate to Audrey, and at the time she is very weak. She can't leave her bed anymore because she is so ill and half-starved and weak. So she couldn't pursue her normal life anymore because of her hunger and her weak condition. And then a British soldier came along and handed her a bar of chocolate, and it was like a world wonder. I'd like to say it was an incredible gift to her because she hadn't got a piece of chocolate in years, and so she couldn't believe it. And well, that bar of chocolate stood like a symbol for all that happened now, for the liberty, for the freedom that came back, for the end of the war. So also in later life, she always enjoyed chocolate and other sweets because she'd missed that during the war, and she knew how important such little joys were.
Yes, a luxury. No, even if
Yes.
it doesn't look like a luxury.
Yeah.
Was Audrey, according to you, a dreamer for having gone with her mom to England to become a ballerina?
No, I don't think she was a dreamer. I think she was very realistic. Because, well, I mentioned before, it was normal in these days for daughters out of rich families to take jobs like that. And on the other hand, she was very talented. She had been told so before many times when she went to ballet school in the Netherlands. In that town, she lived with her grandparents during the war, and after the war, she passed 2 years, I think, in Amsterdam at a bigger ballet school. Well, I cut that out in my book because the book is already very, very long. I had to cut out several parts. But yes, it was like that. She went to ballet school in the Netherlands, and the teachers always told her how talented she was and that she could strive for higher goals, I'd said. So it was just a normal step to go to London to that famous ballet school and to pursue her ways. And her mother was very encouraging in that time and went with her. So they left the Netherlands together and lived in London furthermore.
Amazing.
And it was within her reach. It was within her reach to become a ballerina, although she couldn't realize her dreams in the end, after all.
I see, without revealing exactly what you described to avoid spoilers, that she was always in this dichotomy of supreme happiness and sadness. What would you say about her personality or life experiences that branded her in a way that made her feel that way?
Well, yes, it's true, like you said, she was always, or in her life, she had happy moments and very sad moments. I think that is due to her experiences. The sad experiences stemmed from the war, of course, where she lived in great fear and had nothing to eat, and yes, and was scared. And she had to give up her dream for a moment of dancing toward the end of the war because she was too weak. So that was very sad. And also in later life, she had her very sad moments because she longed very much for a family, but she had several miscarriages where she lost her unborn babies. That was very sad. She was married twice, and the marriages ended sadly because she didn't find her happiness with the two men. So this was sad, of course. But on the other hand, she had very happy events in her life, like her success in movies, for example. She had great friends like Hubert de Givenchy or her best friend Connie Wald. She met her in Hollywood, and she was a lifelong friend, like Hubert. And after the two unhappy marriages, she found the love of her life at the age of 50. So in the end, I think she was very privileged and could look back at a very fulfilled and happy life after all.
Well deserved. After all, she's been here.
I think so, yes. Yeah.
Do you think that Audrey was sure of herself and the things that she did?
No, it is known that she was a very unsure person. So she didn't think of herself as a talented person. Yeah. And she couldn't believe what success she had in movies, because she always said, I can't act, I can't do that. And she was very unsure. And during making movies, she didn't know how to express herself or act, but she had a natural way of acting. Also, she never went to acting school, so she didn't have reason to believe of herself as untalented, but she did. And although all the world described her as a very beautiful and elegant woman, she couldn't believe that. She always said, I am ugly. She always said, I have a too long neck and crooked teeth. And well, yes, she couldn't believe when people said she was a very beautiful woman. But yes, but I think that is normal with women, because a lot of women can't believe in compliments and think they're not as good looking as they are. So
absolutely,
I think it was just human of her to be a bit unsure, and that makes her, I think that makes her a good of herself, to stay modest. And I think every woman can identify herself with that attitude. So I think that is another reason why people, especially women, love her so much.
Yes, absolutely. We can all relate in some bits and parts to what she was. What would you say she enjoyed of acting the most?
Well, I think she loved showing emotions and to slip in different persons, different roles, to express herself. And most of all, I think she loved making people happy, her spectators, her watchers who watched her films. I think that was because she cared so much about other people, so it was a pleasure for her to make them happy, I think.
Would you say Audrey was lucky in life, like she mentions in the epilogue, and why?
I think in the end she was very happy, and she could look back on a fulfilled life. Although she endured so much sadness or grief or the hard times during the war, she got what she wanted after all. She always longed for a family, a loving family, and she got that with her two sons, Jean and Luca, whom she loved very much. And she also did find the love of her life, even if it was late in life. But the most important is she found love after all. So I think she was very happy, like she said in the epilogue, and she always had great friends, as I mentioned before, Hubert de Givenchy, for example, with whom she played together in Roman Holiday, who stayed a lifelong friend. So I think after all, yes, she had a happy life.
Why, according to you, she was, apart from her talent, the reason, okay, maybe we said it, that the reason people love her movies, like her freshness or...
Yes, it was her freshness, it was her modesty, it was her sense of humor. She didn't take herself too seriously. She could laugh about herself. She could make jokes and everybody laughed about it. Yes, that was it, I think. And she was a person, like I said before, everybody could identify with, because there were other movie stars at her time, like Marilyn Monroe or Elizabeth Taylor, but they were regarded as sex symbols, I'd say. But Audrey never was that. She never was a sex symbol in the eyes of the public, because she was too elegant and too modest for that. And that was what made her different from the other actresses, even nowadays, I think.
Absolutely, like she kept that very well. That's amazing. Can we say she was determined, and that's why she succeeded the way that she did? Like, she's constant and like, I'm gonna do it.
Yes, I think she was a very determined person, because she always knew what she wanted. First, she wanted to be a ballet dancer, and she was very ambitious and determined. And afterwards, in movies, she was also a very determined person and very disciplined and very strict with herself. And she held on to the rules. She never was late on the set. And after her professional life in the movies, she was very determined to do some good for other people, like her work for UNICEF shown. So, yes, I think you could say she was a very determined person.
A curiosity I have is regarding the title of the book. Why did you choose that? Is that Breakfast at Tiffany's? Was it your favorite movie, or is it because it's Audrey Hepburn iconic film, or there is other reason?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't me who chose the title, who chose it, and yes, and well, it's common. It's usually that way, and in when you translate the German title into English, it's something like Audrey Hepburn and the Shine of the Stars, something like that. And it was the Spanish publishing house who chose the title Entre Diamantes. I think Entre Diamantes is the Spanish title of Breakfast at Tiffany's. Am I right?
It is Between Diamonds, so it makes reference in some way to Tiffany's. Desayuno en Tiffany's.
Yes. Okay. Yes, okay, but well, I have nothing to do with that title, so it was just chosen by the Spanish publishing house. But I like that title. I think it sounds good. Yes, as you said, it's a reference to the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's.
How would you say her relationship was with her friends? Was she superficial?
No, I think she wasn't superficial at all. She was, no, that wasn't like Audrey. She was a very deep person, a very deep feeling and caring person. She cared very much for her friends, and she had very deep relationships to her friends, like I said before, to Hubert de Givenchy, the designer who was very close to her, and Connie and all the other friends in the movies she made. Yes, she cared for her very much, and they often came to visit her in Switzerland, and she often went to Paris, for example, or Hollywood to visit Hubert or Connie. So yes, I think that I think it's out of the question that she was a superficial person, not a dog.
Why would she allow her husband to impose their ways the way they did? Did her men mark her way in her career or in life?
Yes, when you look at it nowadays, she let her men impose their will on her, but couldn't support the idea of quarreling or having discussions with her. She just wanted to be harmonic with everyone. And also another aspect is that she lived in the 50s and 60s of the last century, and the relationship between men and women wasn't like it is nowadays, where you have equal rights. Men and women have equal rights. It was different nowadays, and it just was common for women to, I'd say, obey their man, because men had the right to decide over everything about the fact a woman liked to work or not. It was the man's decision, not the woman's decision. So you have to understand that from the angle of that former times.
Of course. What would you say was romantic love, or what did it mean to Audrey?
Well, I think romantic love to her was what she found with her partner Robert in later days. And Robert, I think, was the first man in her life who took her as she was. He didn't want to change her. He didn't push her into making films. He just loved her as she was. And that, I think, that's the definition of romantic love to Audrey, being accepted as she was.
What about love towards family? Was it important to her, and why? In later life,
I think the love of her family was the most important to her in her life, because she always longed for a family, for a loving family, and she always said she had so much love to give, so it was natural for her to long for children and to give them her love. That was very important to her, and she did everything to obtain that goal and to achieve that. She even was ready to abandon her career. Her family, her children were more important to her than her career, and yes, she was inclined to give everything up to be there for her children. And sometimes it was a fight with her husband Mel, who wanted to push her into making more films and even more films, and she suffered from that, but because she wanted to spend more time with her children, with her sons.
Yes, when it's so demanding, to make a film.
Yes, she was away for several weeks, even months, and sometimes she took the children with her when they were little, but later when they went to school, it wasn't possible to take her to Paris or Rome or Hollywood, where she made her film. So she suffered very much from the absences.
Absolutely.
It was very difficult from her. Yes.
Why do you think she loved her sis home La Paisible so much?
Well, Audrey was a very European kind of person. As I said before, she was born in Belgium and lived in the Netherlands and London, and she didn't like the hectic of the United States, of New York, for example, and she liked it. She liked things to be quiet and harmonic, and or now, I think, very loud cities, and that wasn't her thing. She wanted quiet, the nature around her, so it was only natural for her to choose Switzerland as homeland. And she loved La Paisible, the estate. She lived her whole life until her death, because it was near a very small village, and she could take walks for hours, and she didn't meet anyone there, and she wasn't recognized, or the village people just didn't care about her being a great movie star. So she could live a very relaxed life there, and she could welcome all her friends on her estate, and she loved to invite them over from Paris or Hollywood and make dinner for them. And she took long walks with Hubert and Connie. So that was the life she dreamed of, and her sons could grow up there undisturbed from the press and paparazzi. So that was the ideal spot to live for her and her family.
Absolutely. Why do you think she decided to join the UNICEF?
Well, as I said before, she always mentioned that she had so much love to give, and she was, in the end, she was such a lucky person. She was so famous. She had a lot of money. The whole world loved her, and she had 2 sons whom she loved very much, who loved her back, and it was natural for her to want to give something back to the people who weren't as privileged as her. So she got to know the work of UNICEF, and she decided to join in that work because she didn't make many movies anymore. She wanted something different in life, who made sense for her. So she joined the work of UNICEF and flew around the world and visited all the poor countries, or countries where there were civil wars at that time. And she wanted to care for the children there, and to help them get medical care, and to get food, and to have a better life.
Like she had suffered. What do you enjoy or love the most of her, and of her movies, of her career? What's your favorite?
Well, what I enjoy most of her personality is her modest attitude, her, what can I say, her down-to-earth attitude, but I also love her elegance, her style. I think she was a role model for women all over the world, and she still is. And I loved her caring way, especially when she worked for UNICEF. I loved her harmonic ways with her friends, her children. Yes, and on the movie side, well, my favorite movie is Roman Holidays, I think, because it was her first big film, and well, it's a very lovely story. I think I love the story of the princess who falls in love with a journalist, but they can't come together. So it's sad and happy at the same time. And well, I always loved Gregory Peck in that movie very much, and I think they were. What I love about it too is that they got to know each other during the making of that film, and they stayed lifelong friends. So I think that's very emotional, and well, yes, I love that. So it's one of my favorite films, but I also love other films like Breakfast at Tiffany's, for example, and the others.
Which do you think was Audrey Hepburn's favorite Audrey Hepburn movie? So by her, the one she preferred.
I also think she preferred Roman holidays because it marked the beginning of her career, and it was, for her, it was a lovely time to spend in Rome at that time. And she made friends there, and she enjoyed making movies. It was her first big success, so I could imagine that was her favorite film. But we don't know. I'm just speculating.
Of course, but yeah, exactly.
We can't ask her anymore, but yeah, just speculation. Yes.
In brief, in your own words, this is my last question. How would you define your book?
Well, I would define it as a mixture of biography and novel. Well, it's meant to be that. Fiction and reality, but it's almost reality. The most part is reality. And well, it's a book about an outstanding person, a role model who inspired millions of people. Yes, that's the way I'd like readers to understand my book.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much for joining us. It's a big pleasure. Also, thank you for the effort.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Yes.
And
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day, and thank you to everyone. Gracias a todos por unirse hoy. And well, a big hug from Argentina to you.
Yes, and a big hug from Germany to you. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.